found you on Twitter, and one of the things I noticed is that you are a writer actually talking about marketing. You're a writer who's talking about kind of the mechanics of being an author beyond just knowing how to write. And I really appreciated that because it seems like most people are just really, really confused by it. They're great writers, but they don't know how to do the social media aspects of it. I don't really know. I mean, I'm starting to figure it out with Twitter, especially in the last 2 days. I got like 50 followers, but
Oh,
prior to that, I wasn't even trying.
yeah.
But one of the things I realized, and this was from finding this guy. His name was George Stiles. He's on Twitter, and all he does is ask questions. That's all he does. I'm like, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so I had him on. His episode will be on right before yours,
Okay.
and I'm like, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that for the month of April and see what happens. After the first question, it was like 10 followers. The
Oh,
second
yeah.
question, it was 10 more. People just want questions. Then they want to answer those questions.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. I feel like when you ask that like a question, it people feel more comfortable engaging in your tweet. And that's kind of how I got started my follower because I tried Twitter at first, like it was like 2014 or something, and I got no traction. So I kind of abandoned it for a while. And then I came back when the pandemic started and was like, I'll give it another try. And I tried to see what other people were doing because I felt like I was just putting stuff out there and nobody was seeing it. Because I read this crazy statistic that your tweet only lives for like 18 minutes or something like that. So to like try to increase the life of your tweet, I was like, how do you do that? So I saw a lot of people in the writing community were actually doing questions. And I tried some of those at first and nothing happened. I would get like maybe two or three people answering, and I was like, okay, this is not working. So then instead of trying to just do questions that I thought would get people's attention, I tried to focus more on questions I had as a writer because I still was fairly new. And I feel like once I started doing that, my numbers just instantly climbed.
I've always found the weakness of Twitter, especially, to be that you can just put a statement out there. To turn it into something a little more empathetic
Mm-hmm.
kind of lightens the mood of that whole environment.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Let's start with you. Tell me about yourself. Tell us all about yourself. That's harder.
Um, Whew. uh,
Interview.
so I always enjoyed writing. I was like on the school newspaper in high school, and I always wanted to write a book, but never really had the confidence to actually go for it. And I first wrote a book that took me like 4 years to write. It was a young adult dystopian story. And I finally was like, you know what? I'm going to publish it. I'm going to give it a go. And I knew nothing, nothing at all. I didn't know about querying. I didn't know about self publishing. I just knew how to get out there. And I was a preschool teacher at the time. So I had a a regular 9 to 5 job. And I started looking into self publishing. I looked into Amazon, and the Kindle Direct Publishing has packages where they can do it all for you. And since I didn't know anything, and I was very much a newbie, I took advantage of that, and they did a great job. They walked me through everything and gave me pointers on what I needed. But when all was said and done, it cost me $3,000, which is not sustainable for someone in the self publishing line of work, because really, how many books do you want to show out that equal that amount of money? So I had to kind of learn how to cut the cost without cutting corners. What tools were going to work to, you know, I would say, I talk a lot about your precious budget for your book. So what was I going to allot those precious funds towards, which would be like editing, marketing, and a cover, if you weren't comfortable with making a cover. So after the pandemic hit, I became a stay-at-home mom, and that has allowed me a lot of time to focus on my writing. And I write when my kid goes to sleep and when she gets a TV turn. And that's how I get all my books out. And I have about 4 or 5 books out now. I have another one on the way. I write on Medium, and I'm on Twitter most of the time because that's my most successful platform. I still need to figure out Instagram and Facebook and all those other wonderful things.
Do you think that you if you hadn't become a stay-at-home mom and you were working like a full-time job, would you have had time? Would you have been able to find time to write?
I think I would have. I think, but I don't think I would have been able to build my platform or my portfolio as fast as I have been able to. And I think a big part of that too was with my series, The Backup Superhero, I switched to focus on novellas, and you can kind of churn those out a little faster than you can a huge novel. So I think that also made a very big difference.
Yeah, because I was just having a conversation this morning with Jan, who she produces this show, and she's also my girlfriend. And we were talking about J.K. Rowling, who's basically the wealthiest writer of our generation
Oh
and
yeah.
of our era.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't think she would have been able to get to that level with if she was in any other country, because the UK has a very strong social safety net. She was out of work for a long time working on her craft. And honestly, like if she was in any other country, I don't think Harry Potter would exist.
I have to agree with you. It does take a lot of time and dedication to put in the amount of work to get your writing to where it needs to be. I find even if I take a break, I kind of slide back to where like a stage or two behind where I was before. So I definitely agree with you there, because a lot of people don't have the time to sit down and work on it as much as they would like to.
Yeah, I remember in 2014, I wrote this novella. I call it a novel because I don't like the word novella, but it's a short novel. And I was on fire with it because I was out of work and I was in a zone for like 6 months where I could just like, I was in a situation where I could just do it and I didn't have to worry about anything, any external factors.
Right.
And then, like 5 years later, I try to do it again. This time, I have clients and I have a podcast, and suddenly, and I also have a smartphone. I didn't have a smartphone back then. I was not an early adopter by any measure, and now I'm distracted and I forgot how I did it. And so I had to remember what all of the factors were. And now I've created a routine where I wake up at like 4 a.m. I don't turn my phone on. I just write, and I don't even turn on the Wi-Fi on my MacBook. I like no internet. It's just a Word file, and from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. I just write, and that seems to have fixed the problem.
Oh yeah, and that's great because like I feel like one of the best ways to work on that is establishing like a routine like you did. Um, I know like right now because my kid's like 4, it's only when I have time. I'm waking up before she's waking up, or I'm staying up late after she goes to bed. So yeah, and definitely like you said, turning off the Wi-Fi definitely helps, and not having that, oh, I just need a second to think, and then you're sucked into social media for an hour.
Oh yeah, yeah, and the apps more and more are being designed to keep you there.
Oh yeah.
Can you can you talk a little bit about SEO strategies?
So I feel like in terms of SEO, you really need to do a lot of planning. So even back when you're planning out your novel, your short story, your novella, whatever you're doing, you really want to think about your target audience to begin with. And I would say even before the book is started, start with a keyword list. I feel like that's something that a lot of people forget until the very end. And if you start with a keyword list, that you can build into that SEO later on, then you're setting yourself up for success that when the book is done, you can just add to it. I watched a lot of YouTube videos because I honestly didn't know anything about it. I feel like it's this topic that everybody skirts around with marketing and SEO and not knowing where to start. And someone suggested coming up with 100 keywords to start. And I was like, wow, that is insane. But it makes sense because then you have a lot to pick and choose from. But then you kind of also get into this rabbit hole of how many like similar words am I looking for in my target audience that are really going to count as an SEO or a keyword. So having that list, I feel like when you're outlining in the very beginning is really going to serve you of great purpose to you later on. And this is a list that you're going to be able to pick from for your promotions that you're going to be putting on social media. Or, if I'm making a blog post for Medium, I'm going to plug those things in throughout my description or my blog post, because those are things that are going to pull up in Google or Medium or wherever someone's searching for something, because you just want to make sure that readers can find it. And that's what SEO search and keywords are for. And it's a very big, complicated topic. I feel like I could go on and on and on and on. I mean, they have a lot of tools out there too. Like if you're talking about what is it, the Kindle Rocket or Rocket? There's like a something from Kindle. It's like a Rocket publisher or something, and you pay. I think it's like $99, and it gives you keywords and SEO search words and things like that. I have not used it myself. I usually just do my own research and go through, Amazon or Google or whatever to make my list up. So it really is up to you. I know there's a Google Keywords as well that also works. So there's a lot of tools out there, just really managing how much you want to spend for them as well, and how much you want to invest in your own time to make up this list yourself.
Gotcha. So, have you were you looking looking at this from the start, or is this something you had to pick up along the way?
Definitely something I had to pick up along the way. I mean, as I said, when I first started writing, I knew nothing. I knew nothing. I just jumped in feet first, knew nothing. And obviously I didn't do very well in the very beginning. No one knew who I was. And I feel like a lot of authors after their first book will give up because they didn't see the success that they wanted right away. But you have to play the long game and be able to put in the effort to consistently build your body of work, your portfolio, whatever you're trying to put out there. Because if you're showing readers you're going to be there over time, then they're going to want to invest the time in you. So, keep building and keep expanding what you have, and that's only going to serve you better. So as I put out this first book, and I almost stopped because I was like, well, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not doing anything. So that's when I started. I had an idea for another story and I wanted to jump back in, and I did a lot of research. But what really helped me was I met a lot of other seasoned writers in the writing community, and they were like, oh, this is a really great idea for your book. Are you going to put out are you going to publish another book? I was like, there's no way I can do it. It costs me like $3,000. It's an arm and a leg. How am I ever going to put out another book? Like, you can do it for nearly free. And I was like, what? Like, this is a thing. So, I kind of learned things from talking to other people. And I feel like a lot of writers feel like it's this, lonely journey to get published. But really, there's so many things that other people can teach you. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to teach it to you. You just need to ask. But that's also, you need to give and take. If someone's helping you out, you need to help them out in return. So I just feel like along the way, I had to learn as I went. So now I'm trying to put that stuff back out there so someone doesn't have to go through exactly what I went through.
Yeah, that's good. That makes sense. That's one of the reasons I have a podcast. I feel like we're in this era where publishing really needs an upset, and
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like because I've never been an advocate for sort of mainstream publishing.
Yeah.
I always wanted to see a future where artists just it was part they handle it themselves, and that's just part of it. And we could very well be on our way to that. I don't know, but if we are, then we're ahead of the game. So,
Yeah.
do you ever talk about in some of your materials A/B testing with, like, let's say, pitch lines or log lines?
I don't think I've gotten to that point yet. I don't think I've gotten to that point yet. I am interested in all of that. And like I said, YouTube has taught me a lot. Reading other articles in Medium has taught me a lot. And for any other writers, I suggest you do just that because you'll learn so much that way.
So I have your article here. Build your indie author brand with an author platform. I would like to talk about that. Let's see here. If I can click into it. All right. So the first part is setting yourself up for success. So what would you recommend to authors who are doing this for the first time? Or maybe they failed the first time and they want to do it again and do it right. Where do you start?
Well, first and foremost, you want to start with your website. And I know that in this day and age, sometimes that feels like you're taking a step back, only because I I heard a lot of people say you want to be on social sites, which yes, I completely agree. Medium is a social site. You're going to be there. If you're blogging there, a lot of people are already there, so they're going to find you. However, when you think about yourself as an author, you want to make this website because it's kind of going to be your home base. It's going to be where somebody can find everything by you, everything about you. So you're going to have a section for, your home page, which would be, here's my latest work, here's where you can subscribe, all the things that people are going to see firsthand that you want them to know right away. And then if you pique their interest enough, you maybe get them to your about the author section, or you get them to your other works by me section, or you get them to your blog section. So having this website, you're going to have it on everything. You're going to have it in your social media. You're going to have it at the back of your book. Maybe, hey, you want to see other stuff by me, come to my website here. It's probably like a 70% chance it's not going to work, but there's that 30% chance someone's going to come and check you out. Who knows? But my take on an author's platform would be your website and your social media. So your website is your home base where everybody's going to find everything by you and where you're at. So, and then your social media is where people can connect with you on a daily basis. So you have to be consistent with posting on those, because you can have them, but if you're not using them, it's not going to do any good. And it's a free tool that I feel people don't take enough advantage of, only because I've heard a lot of people refer to it as, oh, it's like a second job keeping up with social media. And I agree. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, when you get to a certain amount of followers, or, trying to keep growing yourself. But really, if once you've done it for a while, you come up with a routine or a schedule that seems to work for you, and then it doesn't seem so overwhelming as you go.
Yeah. And having like a website with like a contact form
Oh yeah.
is so important. And for a long time, I wouldn't get anything through that contact form. And then after the second season of this podcast, I started getting like weird stuff. And like you could put all the attention in the world on your craft, but the strangest things people will focus on. And it can be pretty interesting. Like I remember I did this one podcast. It was a UFO based podcast. The guy wrote some really interesting books about UFOs, and I'm like, oh well, if I get anything, it's gonna be about that. No, everybody who emailed me through the contact form about that episode wanted to tell me to feed the robins that were showing up. I made this passing comment about how red-breasted robins were showing up on my fire escape, and they're like, you need to feed them. I'm like, I really don't. And so you can learn a lot about the people who are actually digesting your content just by having a place where they can go and reach out to you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Unexpected.
It's super weird. And then there was this like one time there was this woman who was trying to find Jan because she had known Jan for years and she didn't know how to find her. And she remembered my name. And so she just looked me up. She found the website, and then she started buying my books. And then she reached out to Jan. And I'm like, that's interesting. And she's like, I watched one of your short films on Amazon. I didn't know you guys were doing that, And so it's really, really important. And you'll never know how people will use it.
Exactly.
All right, audience research. I think this is really important. I think that this is one of the most neglected chores. How do you get to know who your audience is?
So many writers will tend to write in genres that they're already familiar with. So many writers will neglect this step because they're like, well, I'm already a reader. I already know everything there is to know about people that read in this genre. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. So you really want to do your research on social media and go on Google and Amazon or Google Play Books or Barnes Noble, wherever really you're looking. And this can be as simple as going in the search bar and say, I write in superheroes. So I'm going to say, superhero books. And that will give me a ton of information. I can see what people are posting about. I can see what trends are happening. I can see, what keywords are being brought up as often. And doing something as simple as that will change your whole perspective on what people are expecting right now. And I'm not saying that that's something you have to work into your book, but it's something to keep in mind when you are creating this, that if you're taking 10 steps back from where the genre is, you need to address that. If you're going way in the past with something that's already been done and people have moved on, you need to address that in your marketing. Like, hey, this hasn't happened in such a long time, but now I'm exploring superheroes that first find out their powers. Like, how many times has that been done? But simple searches like that is gonna teach you how you're gonna present this to your target audience and how you're gonna reach them and what promotions they're responding to from other people. And it all plays into your marketing and everything that you're gonna do from then on. And doing this, I feel like, through every step of your journey, whether you haven't started your book yet, you're in the middle of writing your book, you're editing it, you just want to keep checking that and keep doing that target audience research, because it's just going to keep you informed so that when you're ready to do a book launch, you are very prepared and you know that you're at least going to get some people rather than no people.
I know some PR firms do what's called they craft what's called personas, and so they'll be like, well, my target audience is a female, age 18 to 35. She wants to be a writer, but she also works as a barista.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do that in depth too. I actually read a book recently about marketing because it's still something I struggle with. By Redzi, they they have like do blogs and they do courses, and that's actually where I format my book through for free. And it was a free book on Amazon, so I was like, oh yeah, sure, might as well look it up and see. And in there, they said you want to craft this persona of a person. You want to talk about their target price range they'd be willing to spend on a book, what their age would be, um, all that kind of stuff. What genres they'd be reading, and similar to this. So I definitely, yeah, like almost making a profile for your target audience. That way, also when you're making these promotions and when you're writing your description, like it plays into everything that you're going to be doing from then on.
Yeah, that's one of the things I tend to overhear her, because Jan works from home and she works for a PR firm.
Mm-hmm.
And I overhear her on her calls all the time with authors and the marketing people. And they're always talking about the personas. And they're doing it in that very language. And it's really interesting because it's not something I would have ever thought to put effort behind.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something too that when you're self-publishing, you choose self-publish over traditional publishing, that's something you have to keep in mind, that yeah, even though you're taking on a different route, traditional publishing, a lot of that stuff crosses into what you're doing. You're just doing it without so many, as they call it, gatekeepers in the way that are,
That's what I
you
call
know,
them.
getting you to the finish line. So a lot of that stuff coincides.
Yeah. Well, with the thing that whether you're going through traditional publishing or not, I think the key here is to treat it always like an entrepreneurial endeavor. Every book is an entrepreneurial endeavor. Every film is an entrepreneurial endeavor. Because I'm also going to be pushing this to filmmakers too, because it's something that they're also not doing and should be doing.
Yeah.
And if you treat every project like an entrepreneurial endeavor as well as your own personal brand, then it'll start to make sense why it's a lot of master's degrees you're going to have to earn without the certificate.
For sure. And I feel like too, a lot of people, a lot of writers don't consider everything that they're building towards as a brand. And technically you want to think of it that way because people are going to come back, like recurring readers or your audience are going to be expecting something when they come back to what you're writing or your brand per se.
Yeah, exactly. I you know I I hate to use it as an example, but so the best branding that exists is McDonald's.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, you know what it means.
Yeah.
It's always there. Don't have to necessarily go, but you know what it is, and that's
Exactly.
important. So I wanted to bring up. I wanted to continue with the whole self-publishing versus going the traditional route. How, I know that with some people, especially in the business, there's credibility issues with self-publishing. I deal with it all the time, as I'm a biggest advocate for self-publishing and
Yeah.
just doing everything yourself. That's why I call them gatekeepers. It's not a term of endearment. And so, what kind of credibility issues have you run into with advocating for self-publishing and just being able to do it all yourself?
Right. Well, so I've actually made a thread that talked about how like statistics of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And because self-publishing really started to become a trend in like 2007 when Amazon introduced Kindle direct publishing, uh, they found, I think it was in 2014, that I think it was like 80% of the best-selling authors on Amazon were self-published. Like it was a huge number that I hadn't even expected. I looked up 3 times because I wasn't sure. And it was just really surprising because I feel people, readers, a lot of or just a lot of people don't consider you this established author unless you have been accepted by traditional publishing. I think that's the first barrier. And the second one is so many people are ready to get their book out there because they've worked on it for what feels like ever, that they skip really important steps to get it to readers, which is professional editing. Because we all have that one person that has, is a really good editor as a friend, which I don't want to knock those people down because I'm sure they're really good. But when you're when you're when a reader isn't trusting you by giving their money to you, they're expecting nearly perfect. They're not expecting a bunch of mistakes. And even in traditional publishing, you're going to see mistakes. It happens. We're human. But you want to make sure that you're crossing off your T's and dotting your I's before you're putting that out there for people to be spending their money on. Because for new writers or self-published authors, a lot of readers are taking a chance on you because they don't know you. And, they're only going to take a chance on you if, one, your description sounds really, really good, or two, someone's recommended the book to them, or they've read a lot of great reviews saying, yeah, you need to read this. So the next step of that is making your book as professional as possible. And when people skip these steps, then unfortunately, it kind of sets this precedent and the stigma for a lot of other self-published books, which I think is something that all self-published authors are going through. So, the few mistakes kind of set this umbrella for everybody else, which is really, really hard to pass until a few of us make it big or we can kind of prove that wrong. So there's a lot of factors, but I feel like those are the biggest ones.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the things that I think I benefited from to a certain extent is my graphic arts background. I've been obsessed with text layout since I can remember, since before I could really read. I like the way, for some reason, novels look, the way the text of a novel looks, how it conforms
Yeah.
to the page. And so I'll often decide on whether to read a book based on that. I know it sounds like,
No. Oh, I get
but
that.
I'm always looking to see what the font is, what the typeface is, and then I'll even count the lines. I'll be like, oh well, all of Bukowski's novels for the most part are 37 lines. Like I know that,
Mhm.
and I'm obsessed with that to a certain extent. It's also the reason I don't read mass market paperbacks. I find them very uncomfortable to look at.
Yeah. Well, and I feel too that when traditional publishers, going out that they're trying to get as many people from that genre to take in that book as possible because it is a numbers game rather than a reader's game. You know what I mean? How much money can we get in for this book that we just poured a bunch of money into? What can we get in return? So
You know, one interesting thing that I had this guy on last year. He started his own press because he wanted to fill this void of experimental literature. that nobody was taking a risk on. And he started by publishing his own book, and he incorporated the press. He made some deal with Amazon where they would handle all the printing on demand,
Oh wow.
which was really interesting. So it's like
Yeah.
officially published, but it's also still through Amazon,
Right.
which I might have to pick his brain again because I was thinking about doing that. And for some reason, it worked out. Like his books, they pass, like they don't look any different. They don't feel any different. Like they're professional books, and he's doing everything we're talking about here. So he is taking editing extremely seriously.
Oh
His
no.
the second book he published was from a very well-known author. I think previously that author was published by Random House or one of those big imprints, and then he
Wow.
got his like second novel. It was like a 20-year gap, but they were going back and forth on the editing of this guy's second book for months, probably almost a year, and to tell your idol that, oh, you got to go back and fix this, that takes some gonads, I
Yeah.
think. But I don't know if I would have done it. But yeah, I mean, the editing, and just having everything presented professionally, page layout. I know I've bought some books off Amazon where it just looks like somebody dumped a Word file into the publishing app, and that was that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of those huge hurdles to get over, and why again I feel like a lot of readers struggle with. I mean, and I actually did look on Amazon because I was curious myself because I couldn't find any other statistics like past 2014 because I was like, well, technically when the pandemic hit, a lot of people wanted to try their hand at writing, and they said they saw a real big upswing in traditional and self-publishing. So I was curious, and I actually looked through Amazon, and I couldn't really see anywhere on there where you could tell if it was self-published or not because I was like looking like the details and stuff because it's just
So,
interesting.
yeah, so what I think happened is more imprints were started where Amazon fulfills all of their orders.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it looks traditional, but it's still Amazon made on demand.
Okay, I gotcha.
That's my that's my conspiracy theory. That's really rooted in I know that that's what's happening.
Gotcha.
I mean, I invite comments from people who know better. Oh, have you heard that there's a I found this interesting. I just found this out this morning that there might be an antitrust investigation because Random House wants to merge with Simon and Schuster.
Really?
Yeah. Like it's a
Wow.
shrinking, like the major publishing is shrinking big
Plus, with
time.
self-publishing, is becoming so so big.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it more.
Controlled.
Yeah, what's the word for
I
it?
think yeah, it's all about
Yeah.
control. Yeah. I don't know how to talk about the publishing landscape and hold composure because it can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
So we'll just skip that. Hi, oh yeah. So are you on YouTube yet?
I'm not. It's a place I want to get to.
I didn't make a bullet point about this, but I don't think there are enough writers using YouTube, and I'm constantly looking for writers who are one doing what you're doing, talking about their trial and error of every component of this thing, but also I think it could help a lot of writers to start recording their readings and using YouTube as a way of getting their content out there. I've experimented with it to a certain extent, but it's really an area that's missing from YouTube.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like when I see a lot of writers on YouTube, it's talking about the new Kindle Vella or book reviews and things like that. I actually contemplated turning my Medium posts into like a YouTube short to get a different audience that way. It's just something that I haven't had time to sit down and do yet.
Yeah, that's the big thing I'm an advocate for. I always ask writers that, like, hey, are you on YouTube yet? Um, okay, so making a living as a writer. This is what everybody really wants to know. This is what we're all
That's right.
working towards, the elephant in the room. So a lot of the writers that are in my circle, the ones that have been published, whether it's mainstream publishing or self-publishing, but a lot of the more successful writers that I know, publishing is one component of their income. So a lot of them are in the nonfiction space, so they might have speaking gigs, or they might be invited to lecture at universities. Maybe they have other forms of media like a podcast. Uh, to what extent do you think writers should be expected to not treat writing like a full-time job?
I think that goes back to the fact that playing the long game as a writer, it's not going to the people that can make themselves an overnight success and have a bestseller, more power to you. However, many people don't have, like 99% of people don't have that happen. So that's why you need to be consistently building your platform, your portfolio, your body of work, because each book that you put in there is, to me, gaining you another reader, because when they finish one book, they can jump into another book. And unfortunately, unless you're Stephen King or somebody, it's going to take you a long, long time until you can build up a portfolio or a body of work that is going to give you some sort of decent income. And a lot of writers need to kind of treat their brand as this umbrella where you have books as the main thing you obviously want to do, but then doing something like I have done where I'm using my experience to Medium. And then I've also taught a couple courses to kind of bring more income in to help you keep doing that thing of writing that you want to do. And it's hard for a lot of people they have imposter syndrome where they don't feel like they have an experience to pass that on to someone else in the form of whatever it be YouTube or Medium or a course that they're teaching. And believe it or not, no matter, I would say give it a year or two of you trying this thing called writing, and you will have something to teach someone else, because you're that much far ahead or that much further ahead of someone else, and you can teach them something that you didn't know when you were in their shoes. So I would say treat yourself, your brand as this umbrella, and all of these other things that you can put underneath it with your books that are going to help bring you income to give you that sustainability as a writer. Unfortunately, it's never just writing your books, which is what we all just want to do. Just hide away, write our books, and like everybody's like, oh, it's great. Unfortunately, you have to do X, Y, and Z with it, or it's really, really hard to get yourself off the ground. Because also when you do other stuff, people then get more recognition and awareness about you, and that also draws people into your books.
One of the things I also like tell people who are starting out, and this goes for filmmakers and artists too, be prepared to live with your work forever, like literally forever.
Yes.
It might have been something you did 10 years ago, but to some people, they just picked it up.
Right.
That's exactly right. I'd heard recently that that actress from Friends, I forget her name, Courtney Cox. She has no recollection of filming Friends at all. Like,
wow.
She has a missing blank spot in her memory for all those years.
Huh.
Did you know that? That's
No.
so weird. And I think that's an interesting example because a lot of people ask her about it. And people want to hear her perspective of what it was like to make such a historic television show.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know. I don't remember. I know nothing.
That is wild.
That is wild. Let's see here. Let's look at your articles. I like your articles.
Oh, well, thank you. I rate them in the dead of night.
You have a lot of books too. I pulled up your Amazon page. What was your first book? Is it
Kale's
still
An
up?
Outliers Tale. It's my young
Oh,
adult dystopian.
yeah, that's a great cover.
Thank you. I did not make that. Amazon made that. That was the first one that Amazon made for me.
So is the service you're using? It's like a. It's not like hybrid publishing. It's just like you're hiring them to do certain aspects of it.
Yeah, if you actually just go directly to Kindle Direct Publishing, they have like a whole form that you fill out, and then you can actually select packages, and you can even I selected like you fill out what you want, and then they'll actually call you and walk through the whole thing. Like they called me and some guy talked to me and he's like, okay, what do you need? He's like, by the way, congratulations, it's a big step for you. And I was like, yeah, yeah, it is. And, then he just kind of walked me through the whole process. And it was actually kind of nice because the editor called me and talked to me about the edits, and then they sent me like a sheet about what I need to work on and things, and then they sent me obviously the manuscript that need edited, and then I actually talked with the person that did the cover, and then they sent me options for the cover. So it was nice that I got to talk to someone throughout the whole process, but even though I got to talk to them, I still don't feel like I learned a lot from them because they were still doing the job for me. Like I felt included, but I didn't learn anything. I was like, oh, these people did this and these people did this for me, but I really don't know how they did it. So I paid for them to do that, but I didn't learn anything.
Yeah, they don't. Well, if you learn, then they wouldn't be paying them the second time.
Exactly.
What sort of edits were they sending you?
So I signed up for a grammatical edit and a developmental edit. And the grammatical edit was great, but I don't know if a lot of other writers do this, but obviously your writing gets better as you go on. But now that I reread Kelston, like, oh, I might want to go back and like fix some stuff because my writing is obviously was not as good then as it is now. And I feel like I didn't know that as a first time writer. I was just like, I wrote this book and people are like, oh, it's awesome. And then I was off. And I was paying these people for a service, and I kind of wish that someone was a little more honest with me with which, like another seasoned writer who I like, because now with my editing process is much different. I have other seasoned writers, proofread it for me or beta read it for me. And I get much more honest feedback from them. This would really work if you were more showing and telling here, or this needs more description. And I didn't get that from Amazon. I feel I got strictly grammatical and developmental, which is your plot line looks like it's good and it works. So if there's a takeaway from that, I feel like I didn't get personalized feedback.
I would wonder what the qualifications were too, with like whoever's behind the screen.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Okay. I was just curious. I didn't really even know they did that, so
Yeah.
I've learned something. Oh yes. So you were just talking about having people edit your thing, and I got this article pulled up. Why having people close to us read our work is so difficult. Why is it difficult? I won't do it. Jan's not allowed to read my work.
I get that. It's easier to have a stranger read it than to have someone close to you who knows you and who's going to interact with you, know what's going on up there. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you struggle with it?
Um, I used to, and now I don't. My husband is actually my toughest beta reader. Like I go with everybody else, and they're pretty mild, and then I get to him, and he's like, "Oh no, 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 no! You have a lot of stuff to change," and I respect that. That's what I need. I don't need someone to boost my ego. I need someone to take me down a few notches so I can make it better.
I feel like one of the things I need to do is I need to find somebody that I trust that has my taste in literature, which is very laser specific. I
Mhm.
don't know that I think I found one person, but he's a writer and he doesn't like to edit, so he's not an option. Yeah, one of the things that before we leave that subject, one of the things I hear a lot about, and especially hear it on Twitter from the writing community there, and it's how people close to some creatives, no matter what they do, will try to knock them down in some form or another. And I think that's also like that fear rules them to a certain extent.
Hmm. It's hard. Yes, I feel like it's the fear of someone else close to you knowing what's going on up there and feeling yourself a little exposed. And there are a lot of people, like I know, even that I know, who don't consider what I'm doing as a real profession per se. Like it's a hobby, you're not really going to get anywhere with it. And that can also lead to, or jealousy that that's something they want to do and they can't do it. So I'm going to knock you down a few pegs in the process. And it's unfortunate, but it happens a lot.
Yeah, that's very accurate. And the one word I can't stand is hobby.
Yeah.
It's my least favorite word next
Right.
to, well, I'm not going to tell you what the other word is. Try to keep this family friendly. So, what are some hard facts about writing a book series? I'm actually just started one. I never planned to, but I'm almost done with the first one.
Um, Writing a series. Well, you need to definitely keep a working document as you go, something that tells you all the details. Because once you get past like book two, it becomes a lot more difficult to keep everybody straight. And I found this too, like my husband and I were actually having this conversation last night because I have a book coming out soon that's in the backup hero series that I'm in. And he was like, okay, you did this too many times in the series. You need to like write it down when you did it and where you did it so you don't do it again. And that kind of really set things into focus for me because I think now that would be the third book, and then I have one more after that that I've planned so far for that. So keeping details like that in mind that I wouldn't necessarily think of, but a outside perspective reader would be like, well, why am I reading this again? It's just different character, different, whatever. And with that planning and that working document per se, I would say write down all the characters that are going to appear in each book, how they affect the plot. It's going to be huge, but you're going to really it's going to serve you later on when you have to go back and look at details and you're trying to remember something that you're like, oh, now I had to read through the whole book. And that's really going to just take time away from what I have to do.
Yeah, it's really just organization skills. I think I planned. See, I don't even remember. This is why it's important. 5 book series,
Mhm.
and so I set aside 6 notebooks,
Yeah.
one for each book, plus another book to just kind of be the Bible for it all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's probably the best thing you can do because after you get so many in there, and mine are just novellas, like they're small little things. There's so many details that, and people and how they, interact with each other that you have to consider later on that it's like, for each novella in my series, it's the same cast of people, but the focus is on a different character for each story. It's like the first one's on the main superhero Tanzer girl and how she talks about the backup or the superhero league and how it's formed and how the hierarchy goes. And then the second book is like about the bartender, and it's kind of like a prequel where it talks about how the superhero league was formed itself. And then the third book is about the drunk character that's like the drunk superhero, and it's called the Bacaboo Cried Wolf, and he's drunk all the time and he sees something he shouldn't have, but no one believes him. So, but even though they focus on a different character in each book, it has the same cast of characters. They just take places in different parts of the timeline. So that's kind of how I kept it all straight. So I wouldn't have to remember like 10 new names for each thing. Um, and that way readers would not be too upset with me when I focus on a different character for the next story if they got attached to somebody.
Yeah, I'm kind of doing something similar where this first book introduces what will eventually be the bad spirit of the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. And I don't think anybody will get attached to him, though. He's a real horrible person. It's very fun to write, though. And then the next book will be sort of a guy who you think he's going to be a horrible person, but he ends up being the good spirit in the thing.
Oh, that's nice.
And then the third book is sort of an important story of how they sort of clash. And then
Okay.
the fifth book is sort of the larger, or fourth, one, two, three, four. See, this is organization. Oh yeah, your latest one. Let's talk about your latest one. What I've learned from becoming an author illustrator in the realm of children books. That's a tough genre to get ingress. Children's books.
Yeah.
Jan was she interned for a literary agency that specialized in children's books, and the slush pile, like, was just crazy immense.
Oh wow. I can only imagine.
What were some of the things you picked up?
Well, so being a preschool teacher for a long time and now mom, I read a lot of kids' books. So I was obviously interested in trying something and I had a story idea about dandelions because everybody considers dandelion a weed and not a flower. So I thought it was, that kind of diversity, inclusive thing a lot of people are interested in and something I was obviously interested in. And I read it to my daughter and she loved it. And I didn't really know this was a whole new genre for me, a whole new market for me because nothing that I'd ever tried before. And I kind of contemplated for a long time trying to find an illustrator because I wasn't sure if I was able to do it myself. And I mean, I'm decent in art, but I'm not like Picasso. So, and it's really hard to make something very marketable or what is in the taste of the traditional publishing industry. I really went through a lot of other children's books like Mill Williams, who's done Elephant and Piggy, where he literally has colored or white background and just the focus on the characters. And then you have someone like Eric Carle who does collage art. And then you have, someone like Aubrey Wood who does, these really intricate paintings and things for their books. So there's a lot to work with and consider about what I wanted in the beginning. And I had to do a lot of research because it's nothing I knew anything about. I had a story, people liked it. I tried to do some paintings and watercolor because that's all I had. I literally grabbed my daughter's little, like, from the store watercolor that has like 5 colors and some printer paper. And I'm like, oh, it actually turned out pretty good. And I actually scored I queried a bunch of people, a bunch of agents, and got a lot of passes. And then I actually tried for some small publishing houses and got a small publishing house interested. And I went and had a meeting with them and they were really, really excited. And she said, I'm just going to give you pointers. Like, a lot of people don't think about this when they do children's books, but that you want to make everything look cohesive. You want to do your pictures on bigger paper. Obviously, in my case, with better watercolor and better paper, that was gonna really highlight the color. And they were interested in my pictures and were willing to work with me for me to redo them and then consider them. And they had said, for all your your text, you're going to want to make separate illustrations for those. And your cover, you want to be a separate illustration on its own from anything you're going to see in the story to catch people's eyes. And there was just a lot to consider that I hadn't considered. So I considered I learned a lot. And she even said to me, when she showed me the process for what she does with other authors, and she said, like, I literally put the illustration on my screen and I put different text next to them to see what's going to fit the pictures the best, which is something I had never even considered. I never even thought about that. And it made so much sense. So I feel I learned a lot from that meeting and I was very excited. And unfortunately it fell through. I referenced the Writers Guild a lot because they give you a lot of contract feedback and advice and things and how to protect yourself as the author. And she'd offered me a contract, but it was very much in the publisher's favor. And it made me a little bit nervous. So I just asked her, are you open to negotiations? She's like, okay, well, what do you have? So I sent her back some of my negotiation things, which would be like, if it went out of print, would I get the rights back? Things like that. And right, just cover my own butt. And so, and I actually never heard back from her. She just never responded. She just totally ghosted, and which is fine. Like, you're never, nothing is guaranteed. Everybody is unfortunately in this for themselves, which is fine because it's business. But my takeaway is I've learned a lot going forward, And I could self-publish it myself, but my concern was children's books are much different than a regular book. I don't know how to actually format that and put that all together, because Amazon actually does have a children's book story creator app. They also have one for comic books, because I was considering putting a comic book out for the superhero series I have. But it was very, very difficult to navigate and try to get everything together, since I don't think it's where it should be yet. It's one of those things that's still newer. So I actually started redoing all the illustrations like she suggested, because this was back in August, I think I talked to her. And once they're all complete, because the story's already done and edited and everything, I'm going to try again. And if something were to come up, maybe I'll try to self-publish it, but it really depends on if the formatting and everything is where I can get it to be, where I can do it on my own and have it come out looking professional as my other books.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a few things with everything you just said. One, you did the right thing by asking about what happens if it goes out of print, because I've seen that happen to musicians where a publisher will buy their music just to keep it off the market,
Oh,
which is really nefarious because they've already invested in someone else in like competition.
right.
And so, yeah, that's really important. What I have one more question about this, and then we can like wrap this up. What are the most common traits with children's books or with successful children's books that you've noticed? What are some of these authors doing?
So I think the main thing is you want to keep your word count. I mean, you have to really think about what age you're specifying this toward. There is definitely books that are for, birth to 2 years old. There's definitely books that are 3 years to 5 years, 6 to 8 years. You really have to know what age you're marketing toward and what age your book is for, because that also changes your word count. Like I was advised, I'm doing 3 to 5 years old for Dandelion. You're not going to want to go over 750 words. Like that's something I would have never, I didn't know that. So these authors know their word count, they know what age they're doing, and they are able to, you also need connections, because you want to get into schools, you want to get into libraries. Like libraries is one of the hardest things to get into. A lot of self-published authors don't know that you can actually submit your book to Library of Congress, but it's very difficult to get in. I haven't had success yet. I've tried a few times. I actually submitted my backup superhero book and they were like, oh, it doesn't fit our children's section. I'm like, but it's not a children's book. And I don't understand. So I'm going to try that again. But it's really difficult to get into Library of Congress. And then once you do that, you really open up yourself to a lot. And traditional authors kind of already have their foot in the door, because that's kind of automatic. Like a lot of books that go through traditional publishing can get into the Library of Congress fairly easily. And your illustrations, because there aren't many books that are black and white. If you look at a lot of children's books, there's a lot of bright colors, a lot of variations, and definitely certain styles. So, and it also does, by age, the styles, there's a lot of styles by age. So, like birth through 2 years old, you're going to have a lot of touch and feel books, a lot of things talking about sensory things, mirrors. And then you get into 3 through 5, it's talking about characters and relatability and talking about issues that kids like that are going through, or adventures that are going to make them feel like they're going along with the character. You just got to shrink your thinking to think like a kid. It's really difficult. So there's a lot of things to consider. Awesome. Thank you so much again for having me and inviting me on here. I really, really appreciate it, and appreciate everything you're doing to help other artists and authors.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I think it's important. I really do think that there needs to be a disruption, not just in publishing, but in Hollywood, in the arts, whether you're a gallery artist. There needs to be a disruption in which artists take ownership of what they're doing. So
Oh, yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
the end game for me, at least. Thanks, Kayla.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.